I sat up so fast, the sheets tangled around my legs. My chest was tight, like I'd been holding my breath in the dream and hadn't let go. The room was dark, but I could still see him, Ellis, standing by the bedroom window, the same way he always did when he couldn't sleep. But this time his eyes were sharp, not soft. And his voice, though barely above a whisper, was the kind that leaves a mark. "Leave before dawn." That was all he said. Just that one line. Then he was gone. I rubbed my arms cold all of a sudden. I tried to shake it off, tried to tell myself it was just the brain playing tricks again, the way it sometimes does when you're alone too long. But then, the porch light clicked on outside. No breeze. No raccoons. Just the slow flicker of that bulb trying to tell me something. I slid my legs out of bed and reached for my coat. No shoes, no bag. Just the keys from the dish by the front door and my coat thrown over pajamas. The hardwood was cold under my feet, but I didn't stop to think. I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I had to move. By the time I got to the edge of the driveway, the air shifted. It wasn't just the cold anymore. It was heat, rising sudden wrong. The kitchen window blew first. A flash, then fire. Flames peeled up the side of the house like they'd been waiting for permission. I stumbled backward, the blast of it pushing me off the gravel and onto the damp grass. By the time the fire trucks arrived, the roof had already collapsed. One of the younger responders kept asking me if I'd left the stove on. I told him no. Twice. The fire chief said it looked like a gas line fault. The deputy just shrugged. But Ellis said otherwise. And my son didn't even ask if I was hurt when I called him. I called Drew with shaking fingers. The fire was still burning, though the worst of it had been swallowed. I sat on the curb wrapped in a blanket a firefighter handed me, trying to remember how to speak like a person again. He answered on the second ring. "Hey," he said too, even. "You okay?" I waited for more, but nothing came. "There was a fire," I said. The house, I figured something like that might happen. Eventually, he cut in. That stove was ancient. His voice didn't carry surprise or concern. It was flat, like he was confirming a guess. "I'll come get you," he added before I could respond. "Kayla's up too. We'll be there in 20. I watched the headlights crawl toward me through the thin morning mist. Kayla was the one who got out. First arms open expression tight, like a smile she'd practiced. "Oh, Marcella, I'm so glad you're okay," she said, her perfume reaching me before her hands. Drew stayed by the car, hands in his pockets. He didn't ask what had happened, didn't look at the ruin behind me. He just opened the back door. The ride was quiet. Drew tapped his thumb against the wheel. Kayla stared straight ahead, jaw tight. When I asked where we were going, Kayla answered before Drew could. "You'll stay with us, of course," she said, cheerful and quick. "Just until things get sorted." I blinked. I hadn't agreed to that. I hadn't said anything. But we kept driving past the road that led to the motel, past the coffee shop Ellis used to like. At their house, Kayla led me straight to the guest room. She'd already turned down the bed. There were fresh towels folded on the chair, a cup of water on the nightstand. It felt staged. Drew stood in the doorway, hands still in his pockets. "Try to get some rest," he said. "We'll figure things out later." I nodded, but didn't lie down. I sat on the edge of the bed until morning broke through the blinds. Then I heard Kayla's voice in the hallway, low and quick. The guest room smelled faintly of new paint, like it had just been finished. The bedding was crisp, folded, with corners too sharp to be from regular use. The drawer handles were untouched, no fingerprints on the brass. It was a nice room, almost too nice, like someone had known I'd be here. Each evening, Kayla brought in a cup of tea. Same mug, same blend. She always watched me take the first sip, before smiling and leaving the door slightly ajar. I started pretending to drink it, letting it cool on the nightstand until I could pour it into the bathroom sink. My mouth stayed dry, but my mind stayed clear. One morning, I reached for my phone, and it wasn't there. I checked the dresser, the floor, even the pocket of the coat I'd worn the night of the fire. Kayla saw me searching. "You probably left it at the house," she said gently. "We'll see if anything was recovered." Her tone was smooth, practiced. I knew I hadn't left it. I always kept it charging overnight by the lamp. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay on the edge of the bed, listening. The walls in this house were thin, if you paid attention. Around 2 footsteps moved past the room. A pause. Then soft voices. I slipped off the bed and crouched near the door. It wasn't closed all the way. "She still thinks we're helping her," Kayla whispered. A longer pause. I couldn't hear Drew's reply. Kayla again. "She won't ask questions. That's the good thing about her. Passive." I moved back to the bed and pulled the blanket up to my chin, forcing my breathing to stay slow even. I didn't sleep. Not even when the sun came up. When Kayla came in with the tea tray, I smiled and thanked her. Then I waited until she was gone, poured the tea down the sink, and opened the dresser drawer to count what little I still had. And that's when I realized the key to my old lockbox, the one I kept hidden in my suitcase, was gone. I told Kayla I needed to get some air. She handed me a scarf and offered to drive, but I said I wanted to walk. Instead, I called a cab from the corner store 2 blocks away. At the county office, the woman at the front desk asked for my name and property address. I gave it, then waited while she tapped at her keyboard. Her fingers slowed. She leaned forward, squinting at the screen. "That property's already been updated," she said. "Updated how?" She turned the monitor slightly so I could see. "Ownership changed 3 days ago." I stepped closer. There, in bold, was my old address followed by a name that wasn't mine. Drew Vance. My mouth went dry. That's not right. I didn't sign anything." The clerk glanced at me. It was a digital transfer. E-signed. 2 witnesses logged. One was a notary. I shook my head. "No, that's impossible. I don't even own a computer. I never." She clicked into the file. Signature on file. "You can file a dispute, but we'd need evidence it wasn't yours." I stared at the screen, trying to make sense of the squiggle next to mine. Drew's signature, too neat to be accidental. It was dated the day after the fire. I thanked the clerk, barely remembering the words. Outside, I leaned against the brick wall, the air too sharp in my lungs. Back at Drew's house, no one asked where I'd gone. I went straight to the guest room, opened the suitcase, and ran my fingers along the fabric lining where I'd once hidden the lockbox key. Gone. Just like the deed. Just like my name. That night when Kayla brought the tea, I left it untouched. I stared at the wall while the house fell quiet again. I didn't cry. I didn't move. In the morning, I folded the documents I'd printed at the county office and slid them beneath my pillow. Then I picked up the cup she left unsipped and tipped it into the bathroom sink. Tomorrow, I'd ask about the pills. Kayla began setting a little white pill beside my plate each morning. "Your vitamins," she'd say with that patient smile. "They'll help you sleep better." Drew barely looked up from his phone. I started pocketing them after the second day. At dinner, it was the same. A new glass of water, another pill. "You forget sometimes," she'd say, pressing it toward me. I nodded, pretending to swallow, while her eyes stayed on my throat. Then I'd dab my mouth with a napkin and tuck the pill beneath it, careful not to rattle the glass. After 3 days, I had 4 of them wrapped in tissue inside my purse. The next morning, I told Kayla I was going to the library. She didn't object, but I caught the look she gave Drew, a small, wordless signal. The pharmacy was nearly empty. I waited for the pharmacist to finish with an older man, then slid the tissue across the counter. "Could you tell me what these are?" She glanced down, then frowned. "Where did you get them?" "They were given to me as vitamins." She looked again, her face changing just slightly. "These aren't vitamins, ma'am. They're a prescription sedative. Strong ones. You shouldn't be taking them unless prescribed. My stomach turned. Could they make someone confused? Forgetful? She hesitated. Yes, very easily. I thanked her and stepped outside, but my legs gave out halfway down the sidewalk. I sat on a bench until the shaking stopped. By the time I got back, Kayla was in the kitchen stirring soup, humming. She looked up, cheerful. There you are. Did you find a good book? I told her I had. My hands were steady by then, but my voice wasn't. That night when she brought the tea, I waited until the door clicked shut. Then I carried the cup to the sink, poured it out slowly, and let the drain swallow the last of her kindness. The next morning, I would call Henry, my lawyer. I needed to know what else had been changed without my consent. The fireproof folder had been in the back of my closet for years, thick with every paper that ever mattered. The will, the trust account details, even Ellis's last handwritten note. I hadn't thought of it since the fire. But now, with the pills, the deed, the missing key, I had to know. I called Henry from the park bench near the pond, where I knew no one could overhear. I need to check on something, I said, lowering my voice. My accounts. The trust. The file you helped me build. He paused. You already did. Last week. No, I didn't. You called and asked me to pause all access. Said you were reorganizing everything, changing the passcode for security. I went still. I never made that call. Henry's tone shifted. Then someone else did, Marcella. Someone who knew exactly what to say. My hand tightened around the phone. Can you reverse it? We'll need to meet in person. Quietly. No email. I hung up and sat there while ducks coasted across the water like nothing had changed. But everything had. Back at Drew's, I began collecting anything I still owned that had my name on it. Old letters, a copy of Ellis's business license, even my voter card. I slipped them between the pages of a book Kayla would never open. Then I started testing the locks. The guest room door had none. The window opened halfway. The back door had been changed, new bolt, new key. I checked the drawer where I used to keep my backup keys. Empty. That night, I propped my phone between two books on the dresser and hit record. I dimmed the screen, angled it toward the hallway, and left the door cracked just enough to catch sound. If I was wrong, I'd delete it in the morning. But if I was right, if they were doing more than just erasing my name, I needed proof. I lay awake and stared at the ceiling, listening for footsteps. At 2:14 a.m., I heard the door creak. A voice I knew followed. She's out cold, Drew whispered. I waited until the house fell silent the next morning before unlocking my phone. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped it. The video had stopped recording after 5 hours. I pressed play and turned the volume low. For the first hour, only the hum of the heater and my own restless shifting. Then at 2:14 a.m., the door creaked. A pause. Drew's voice, quiet but clear. She's out cold, Kayla answered. 2 more weeks. Then we file the incapacity claim. The trust kicks in once she's declared incompetent. My heart stuttered. Drew again. You're sure that's how it works? I checked with the lawyer's office. Her signature's already on the form. Kayla's tone was calm, businesslike. We just need the doctor's note. I stopped the playback. My chest felt tight, the kind of tightness that comes before tears, but none came. I replayed it once more, slower this time, letting the words settle. Declared incompetent. Signature on file. Trust kicks in. They'd planned everything. I copied the file to 2 USB drives I'd bought years ago for family photos. One I labeled with an old folder name Christmas 2012. The other I wrapped in paper taped inside the lining of my purse. After that, I deleted the recording from my phone and emptied the trash folder twice. If they checked, they'd find nothing. The rest of the morning moved quietly. Kayla made coffee, Drew left for work, and I pretended to read the paper. She asked if I was feeling better, if I'd been sleeping well. I told her I had. I even smiled. When she left the room, I let my hands unclench. My wrists ached from how long I'd been holding still. By noon, I was at the bus stop near the grocery store with one of the drives in my coat pocket. I told the driver I needed to stop near Maple and 3rd Henry's office. It was time to tell him everything. Ellis used to say it whenever we drove past empty houses on quiet streets. Don't put all your eggs in one address. I thought he meant it metaphorically. Maybe he did, but he still handed me a thick envelope the year before he died, asked me to sign, and told me not to open it unless something ever felt off. I hadn't touched it, had forgotten about it honestly, until I stepped into Henry's office that afternoon and saw the worry on his face. I brought something, I said, placing the USB on his desk. You need to hear it. He listened to the recording in full jaw, tightening at every pause. They've already filed to access the trust, I said once it ended, claiming I'm mentally unfit. He took a breath. They're moving fast. I opened my purse and pulled out the unopened envelope from Ellis. I'd taken it from the small box I'd buried in the old garden last fall, the one no one knew about but him and me. Henry peeled back the flap and scanned the first page. This is it, he murmured. Ellis set up a second trust. Horizon. I sat straighter. What's in it? He flipped pages. A property in Shelburne. Fully paid off. A modest annuity. 2 separate accounts under your name only. No power of attorney attached. I hadn't known. Ellis never told me the full extent, just that if things got strange, Horizon was the fallback. I leaned forward. Can you activate it? Henry nodded. Yes. We'll move everything quietly. The house, the annuity, the funds. I'll draft the transfer notices today. No public filings, I added. Not yet. I don't want them to know until I'm already gone. He nodded again, slower this time. You're not planning to confront them, I already did. They just didn't hear it. I stood smoothing the edge of my coat. Send everything to the Shelburne address. I'll be there by the weekend. When I stepped outside, the air felt different. Not lighter. Not cleaner. Just mine. I wore gray slacks and a black blouse, plain pressed clean. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to remind them I was still the woman who raised their son, ran a household, buried a husband, and built a life from scratch. I rang the doorbell just after 6. Kayla answered with a bright smile that slipped as soon as she saw the envelope in my hand. Marcella, we weren't expecting. I won't stay long, I said. Stepping inside, Drew stood near the kitchen island halfway through, pouring a drink. What's going on? I handed Kayla the envelope without a word. She looked down at it like it might burn through her fingers. She didn't move to open it. It's all there, I said. A copy of the Horizon Trust. A transcript of last night's audio recording. And a formal notice of pending civil action. Drew laughed short and bitter. What is this, some kind of stunt? You've been confused for weeks. No, Drew. I've been watching. That's different. Kayla opened the envelope. I watched the color drain from her face as she read the first page. Her mouth parted slightly, but she said nothing. I never signed over the house, I continued. And I never authorized those pills. You filed paperwork declaring me incompetent without a diagnosis. That's fraud, Drew's voice raised. You think you can scare us with some half-baked legal threat I don't need to scare you? I'm done explaining myself. Kayla looked like she wanted to speak, but I didn't give her the space. My attorney will be in touch, I said, steady as stone. I won't. I turned before they could answer, before Drew could throw out another excuse, or Kayla could fake another smile. I stepped into the evening air and closed the door behind me. I didn't flinch when it clicked shut. The next morning, I packed what little I had, tucked the second USB drive into my coat pocket, and gave the guest room one last look. By noon, I was gone. The road to Shelburne curved through old farmland and sleepy hills. Just before the ridge, the new house came into view, a modest cottage with a tin roof and birch trees lining the path like old friends waiting to be remembered. I let myself in with the key Henry mailed 2 days ago. No one met me at the door. No one asked where I'd been or what I'd brought. The silence wasn't heavy, here it was mine. The kitchen had a view of the road, and the bedroom overlooked the garden. A garden that hadn't been tended in years but still carried the bones of someone's care. A rusted trowel sat forgotten near the edge of a low stone wall. I picked it up and turned it over in my hand. I unpacked slowly. There was no urgency this time. The plates went into the cupboard one by one. No need to set two. I ate when I was hungry, not when a clock or another voice told me it was time. Ellis's coat, the one he wore every fall, now hung by the door. Not for grief, for memory, for something steady when the wind picked up. I brushed my fingers across the sleeve as I passed it. Most days I took the same short walk to the mailbox, to the bend where the creek broke through the tree line, to the flat stone bench someone had left beneath the tallest birch. I sat there now, watching leaves gather at my feet. I didn't think about the fire, or the pills, or the signature someone forged in my name. I thought about the first time Ellis held my hand on a walk like this. I thought about how quiet can be a comfort, not a punishment. I thought about the Horizon Trust, how he'd built it without telling me, not out of secrecy, but belief. That I would know when to use it, that I would recognize the moment. I hadn't lost everything, just the parts I never really needed, and for the first time in months, I slept with the window open.